All right, fantastic. So welcome everybody to the fourth edition of our Farmversity Rising. It's a series of talks hosted by Indian Multiversity Alliance. I'm Manas and I've got the good fortune of speaking with the people in this conference and this seminar. Multiversity Alliance is a informal collective of various uh, academic, informal institutions, projects, people across the country, and is also part of the Global Eco-Varsities Alliance, which is a global collective of such projects. And in the IMA, we have a Farmversity vertical, which is a beginning of bringing various projects in the farming space, in the natural space, in the grassroots rural space collectively. It can be to do with the farming, processing, uh, innovation. And this is the first series of dialogues we are hosting here. And I would, while we are talking, I would invite people to type in the chat where are they joining in from, and if they have any questions, please mention them in the chat. And we have Kala and we have Atul here, who are part of the IMA team, and they will help us bring these questions together. And now with that, let me introduce our guests today, Kavita Kuruganti, who is a noted activist. I hold her in a lot of respect for because we have interacted on various platforms to do with the GM mustard and farm laws. So that's Kavita for us. And we have Rama Subramanian, who is a noted academician and activist on ground, not just academics, but also a lot of grassroots activity, which he is known for. And after that, let me just hand it over to invite Kavita first to give her introduction in brief and tell us what is she alive to these days. Please, Kavita, over to you.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here. I live in Mysore and I'm not a farmer. I consider myself as a friend of farmers. And I've been working on issues related to sustainable agriculture as well as farmers' rights for about 30 years now. I began in the Deccan Development Society. Right after my master's, I just packed my bags and landed in a place called Pastapur and had the good opportunity to work with Dalit women farmers uh, in millets cropping systems area in a rain-fed pocket of the Deccan Plateau. And subsequently, I moved to different places, been in various organizations. But these days, for about 15 years now, I don't hold a job. I don't earn any money. I'm busy spending my partner's money and trying to liquidate him. And I'm part of an informal platform called ASHA, Alliance for Sustainable and Holistic Agriculture. I'm part of Makam, Mahila Kisan Adhikar Manch. I'm one of the steering committee members of National Coalition for Natural Farming. I'm also part of Coalition for a GM-Free India. I'm associated with RRA Network. So a lot of informal platforms. And I basically do things that I think is about buying time for real alternatives to emerge. There are several things that governments do which have such sweeping powers that they may not really allow good ideas to germinate and emerge if those developments are allowed to actually establish themselves. So my work is campaigning against, uh, let's say, negative developments and buying time for others, like all of you who are doing excellent work. That's about me, Manas.
Thanks, Kavita. And now let me invite Ram to give a brief introduction. Let's hear it from you.
Yeah, because Kavita started by saying she's not a farmer. I should also give the disclaimer. I'm neither a farmer nor do I have a farmversity as such. I My journey has been like started off with like most young people, more of an ideal and less of a clarity of ideas. About 26 years ago, wanting to be looking at what is anything that will make the planet better. And I stumbled upon Dharampal's work and ended up working with him for about 6, 7 years. Gandhian historian. It kind of changed the way you look at the world and the way people and everything. So I think we were lucky to find him. So since then, my journey has been through Samanvaya over the last 25 plus years, has been primarily working with anybody whom we think will, any movement, whether it is activism or NGOs or academics. I often mention that I'm a social entrepreneur before the term became fashionable to flaunt. Uh, I set up a consulting firm where people, just like Kavita said, she's liquidating her partner's money. I liquidated myself, my corporate consulting in the first 6 months, and then said, okay, we'll work with only non-profits and only with social movements. But in the process, ended up initiating things wherever we found something was missing. And that's my journey so far has been. I'm part of the Nammalwar Multiversity, which has been trying to work closely with local economies in Tamil Nadu, particularly. I'm part of a small initiative called Sustainable Livelihood Institute, which we started about almost a decade ago, through which I worked with grassroots enterprises and farm women leaders for almost a decade now, traveling all over Tamil Nadu. My work is largely based out of Tamil Nadu. And in the last 5, 6 years, I have been more closely engaged with the government and looking at how that system operates. Right now, I work with two of the largest rural livelihood or rural life-centered programs in the state. One is specifically looking at agriculture, other looking at livelihood as such. So, over the last 7, 8 years, my focus has been largely asking a few questions. If things were to change the way many of us work towards changing them, we aspire to see some changes. Do we have an institution mechanism? Do we have any institution that is there currently that can actually hold such a work or activity? So I have been primarily looking at leadership, knowledge, and institutions that can hold the planet or the work that people aspire for. Because my experience has been institutions have been founded all around in mistrust, through exploitation, for extractive work. We do not have many institutions that are founded, like Kavita mentioned about several informal networks. Except in informal networks, formal institutions are not founded in trust or compassion. How do you create institutions that are new, which can actually hold a world that is that will be better? So that is an ideal I work with, but pragmatically speaking, I my every day I wake up to my desktop where I have this IPCC statement which says fast closing window of opportunity to make life sustainable on this planet. That's a daily reminder, if not our news feed. That is a daily reminder that there is a fast closing window of opportunity before one can make any changes. So that's where I kind of keep the ideal with a sense of humor, keep watching at it, and work with what is practical today, whether it is with the government, with the civil society, or with activists. I also found that academics gives a lot of space for activists that we have not explored. I have stumbled into academia. Many introduce one as me as an academician, and many academic friends of mine will not feel comfortable about it. हर बार जाते हैं अंदर तो गाली देते हैं, बहुत लोगों को गाली देते हैं. हर बार कॉलेज के अंदर गया तो सबको गाली दिया, प्रोफेसर को particular. So they will not feel happy about it. But I do teach in colleges a lot now. I get invited and keep talking, and I'm offering courses in colleges because there are opportunities that I think needs to be explored. And academia has to play a very significant role. That is an area I work on right now. So I keep transcending between being a field as consultant on one side to activism part time and working with a lot of civil society and academia on the other. So this is broadly my of my work. But fundamentally, I am concerned with these two things that I mentioned. What is the what is it that can ensure sustainable livelihoods? How can we ensure that in this limited space of time we have, if at all we have that time? I'll stop there.
Thanks, Ram. That was uh, amazing. And I did look at, there is a document which lists the the work which you have done in the past few years, which runs into some 7 pages. It's on some Unway website. A lot of links, a lot of interesting things to study or look at. There's a huge mind there. Coming to the topic today, which is to deal with laws, policies, and the schemes. Now, that's a huge field. For the past 2, 3 days, we have been batting around with what to cover and what not to cover with Kavita and Ram and Atul and Manish here. And we'll try to keep it uh, crisp, hopefully. But I think that will open another 10 sessions individually. Let me invite Kavita. Please just define for us briefly, like the way you told me yesterday, the laws, policies, and the schemes.
Yeah. So I found this conversation today being framed in the context of policies and policies alone. And I wanted to make a point which all of us should understand if we are not in that space, that there's a clear distinction between written and unwritten policies, statutes that get created by lawmakers, either in the parliament or in the state legislatures, and schemes and programs, which essentially run by money being put into some implementation modalities with some institution or the other, which we call as the government. So I mean, we've all, in the kind of representative democracy that we have in India, whether we like it or not, even if we are advocates of, let's say radical ecological democracy, everything vested in the Gram Sabha, basically, um, we have a given situation, which is that we have a union government. India is a union of states. We have state governments. We have multi-tiered governance structures. And we have the Gram Sabhas also, which notionally allow every adult to have the right to decide what sort of development do they want to create for themselves. Now, what happens in reality is that there is no congruence between the stated and unstated policies, the legislations, and the schemes and programs. For instance, I'll just take 2, 3 examples and try and explain what I mean by that. And this is important to engage with because let's say all of you are starting farmversities and you are concentrating on ecological agriculture, whether it's certified organic farming, uncertified organic farming, natural farming, permaculture, whatever it is. And you don't want genetically modified seeds. But tomorrow, if the government allows GM seeds to be grown, you know, your neighbor begins growing GM seeds, your farm will get affected because GM will contaminate, pollen flows unrestricted with wind, insects, and so on. Or you are doing ecological agriculture through your multiversity, your farmversity, but a special economic zone is announced and land is snatched from you in the name of what is called as eminent domain. You will have to engage with that situation. A friend of mine called Kapil Bhai Shah, on the fight that we have put up on GM, for instance, says that we are like good farmers who have our heads bent down and we are transplanting or doing something in the farm at a given point of time. And suddenly you find a bull running into your farm or some other animal running into your farm, you know that things will get destroyed. You will have to engage with it. And it is in that context that I think this particular session has to engage with what do we do with state policies. That's one part to it. But another part to it is that, we find that right now there's no level playing field between a destructive agriculture paradigm and what we all want to promote in our farmversities. For that reason, also to make government put its investments on the correct paradigm as we imagine it, for both these reasons, to stop something destructive as well as to make sure that the monies that we are giving to governments come back for investments on the right things. I think we need to engage. But going back to the question of, and this is what Gandhi would have called as Sangharsh and Nirman. Nirman's constructive work element requires you not just to do what you want to do in your farm, but to get the state to respond to what you want to do and for it to spread. Especially in the age of climate change, when we are running out of time, when our kind of paradigm is the only solution, not just for better adaptation to the climate emergency, but to actually stop and sequester carbon into the soil. So I think we need to engage, and that to me is constructive work engaging with the state as well as sangharsh to stop destructive that the state or the markets initiate. What is the distinction between policies, laws, and schemes? Let's say the government announces on the floor of the parliament that we will make sure that MSP, which is minimum support price, reaches all farmers, that you're actually able to realize MSP when you go to sell your farm produce. That is a policy intent, whether it is written or not written, being declared by the finance minister on the floor of the parliament. It's part of the budget speech. That is a policy where you are expressing what you stand for, what is your intent, what is your objective. That's actually a positive example of the government saying, we want all of you to get better prices and we'll make sure MSP is a reality. But then for that MSP to become a reality, one route can be that you actually create a law for it. where it becomes an entitlement, where it becomes a hak that can be legally enforced, where it becomes an obligation on the government to actually uh, translate what it has stated into a accountable reality.
Which of course is not there right now. Yeah.
No, that is exactly what I want to illustrate. कि policy एक है, statute तो नहीं है, but if they create a MSP guarantee law, that will be one way of translating your policy statement into a reality, जहां पे सरकार अपने आप को जवाबदार बनाती है, the obligation legally in an enforceable fashion. If you want to rush to a court, you can. That is when the policy will become a statute. India में आज के दिन farmers are fighting for that MSP to become a law, a legally enforceable entitlement for themselves. सरकार देने के लिए मना कर रही है. People are losing their lives in the struggle. That's about the statute part. But without a statute also, अगर आप देखेंगे हरियाणा में there's something that is enforcing MSP on the ground in a scheme-based mechanism where price deficiency payments are being given on 13 crops. If you see the difference, one is a policy statement, another is a struggle for a law, and thirdly, some state governments are enforcing it through a scheme. If I were to take another illustration, which is about, the government says, some have said it, but it's not always said in a articulated fashion, in a written fashion. मगर सरकार का डेवलपमेंट पैराडाइम जो है, उनका विजन जो है, they want to emulate what has happened to the so-called developed world, जहां पे farmerless खेती होगा, खेती भी बहुत कम होगा, किसानी नाम का चीज नहीं होगा, बड़े कॉर्पोरेट्स करेंगे, and they want most farmers to leave agriculture and go into other sectors. But to make farmers move into the other sectors, they don't create pull factors. It's not as though opportunities exist in other sectors. So the unwritten policy environment is to make farming difficult in 1,000 ways. But you don't create opportunities. In fact, more and more we are having, despite whatever numbers that they say, it's not just jobless growth in other sectors, but jobless growth in agriculture also. You bring big machines, you bring herbicides, you do this and that, so that employment opportunities in agriculture are curtailed. So that's
like bringing, like the schemes they're creating around stopping the stubble burning, bring mechanizations and all that, but
criminalizing farmers. There's a statute there, incidentally, to trouble farmers. The unwritten policy is to push farmers out. And in terms of schemes and so on, after pushing out farmers, they'll find that, there's no employment. Whatever employment that agriculture is able to provide, even that you reduce. And then you're forced into a situation where you have to provide rural employment through another act and scheme. So I hope with these illustrations, you've understood that there are written and unwritten policies. Pretty often, there are no statutes or laws that actually support farmers. The most visible sangharsh in this country actually happens with farmer unions staging protests on the ground, on the streets, on a daily basis across India. But unfortunately for us, farmers have not secured rights and entitlements for themselves. आप सबको याद होगा लॉन्ग मार्च बोल के फ्रॉम नासिक टू मुंबई, हजारों आदिवासी किसान पैदल चले आए थे मुंबई में, और अंत में बहुत दिन चलने के बाद उनके हाथ में एक कागज पकड़ा गया था जिसमें महाराष्ट्र सरकार ने कहा आपको हम एक कमिटी बना के आपकी पूरी बातों की सुनवाई करेंगे, आप घर चले जाओ. Most farmer agitations actually end with no statutes, no entitlements, which farmers are able to secure. And the schemes and uh, programs really don't work on the ground. I'll say one last thing and stop, Manas, which is that ideally, most of these schemes and programs, even if we don't have a good policy, even if we don't have statutory entitlements, should be accessible to farmers. But what happens in reality is that most of the decision making authority with Indian agriculture, despite what the constitution says, despite what the 73rd amendment, that empowers panchayats and gram sabhas says, despite PESA, despite Forest Rights Act, several progressive things like that, what happens is that the union government gets to decide on most things in India's policy setup, ecosystem related to agriculture. एग्रीकल्चर क्रेडिट कैसे होगा, इंटरेस्ट रेट्स क्या होंगे, एग्रीकल्चर इंश्योरेंस कैसे होगा, एग्रीकल्चरल ट्रेड पॉलिसीज, एक्सपोर्ट इंपोर्ट ड्यूटीज क्या होंगे, फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट किसके साथ साइन किया जाएगा, या एग्रीकल्चरल टेक्नोलॉजिकल पैराडाइम में कहाँ पे पैसा दिया जाएगा, what will the privatization push be, what will digitalization look like. Most things are decided by the union government, and state governments whose area it is as per Constitution of India, agriculture, they don't get to decide. Gram Sabhas and Gram Panchayats don't get to decide. So the picture out there is pretty bleak when it comes to policies, legislations, and schemes and programs. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Kavita. There was quite a picture. Let me take it to the Ram. Let me take it to Ram. And when we talk of agriculture, by constitution is a state prerogative, and but uh, we have seen over many years that the larger decisions, the framework has been set, that the tone has been set by the central government. What is your experience? What kind of, let's say in Tamil Nadu, or especially, let's say we are talking in the context of setting up farmversities, running farmversities, or creating a learning ecosystem for youth outside formal agriculture universities. What is your view or experience has been with the policies and schemes, let's say in your state or with your projects?
Manas, I understand most of these people have, in some level, they are part of some Farmversity initiative, or they're attempting a Farmversity initiative
That's
here.
true. Yeah.
So I would just like to give a glimpse or a visual of what it looks like if you're working in a village, or in a, let us say, in some block, or at whatever level you're working, attempting to bring farmers together and create a learning space, right? uh, First thing I would suggest to people is not to get overexcited about engaging with the state, because engaging with the state itself is it's a very difficult and a thankless job. Like what Kavita said, it's a bleak picture out there in terms of the policies and schemes. Fundamentally, because there is uh, one is the entire centralization that has been going on for quite some time now in terms of agriculture. And digitalization, particularly, is taking it to the next level. And even worse is the entire push towards people talking about artificial intelligence now. Because last time I was in an agriculture university, a professor actually told me that you can do farming sitting in front of a laptop. And agri insurance company gentleman mentioned to me that satellites will monitor and decide how much insurance a farmer has to be provided. And I had just met Professor Ismail the previous day, and he said, I asked him what is a simple sign of identifying soil health. And he said, when I walk into the farm, I look at the disintegration of cow dung, and that is for me the indication of the richness of the soil. So when I asked the insurance agent, when he mentioned that we look at the satellite images and decide on the farm, my question to him was, will your satellite image capture the disintegration of a cow dung in the farm? And he thought I was being ridiculous, and I was just asking him a question to ridicule him. But reality is, there is an entire thought process, an entire way of thinking that is moving towards saying more automation and more uh, kind of programmed, kind of algorithm driven world will somehow be called progress or development. And that is penetrated every area. And farming is an area where consistently we have, because there is no other to protest. If government were to bring a change in an industrial policy, an industrial body has to be consulted to create. When farmers are, when you create a policy for farming, you do not necessarily have to consult farmers. You know. Most often than not, that is the sham that takes place in the name of consultative meetings, which nothing much happens. In most places, it is dispensed with. Famously, in the GM issue, one politician who's no longer there, but a former chief minister of a state, once commented that I will only talk to technology people because farmers don't know technology. There is an epistemic injustice at a level that uh, it is an accumulated over a long period of time that we talk about when we talk about this entire engagement. But coming to what happens at the farm level, at a local level, uh, I'll give you I mean, most often than not, it is the first sign of natural farming suddenly becoming popular. I think I was in Karnataka when somebody was talking to a villager and he mentioned that now he's a natural farmer. And then he said, till a few years ago, we were called organic farmers. I was
Mhm.
like, I asked him why. Then he said, no, there was a policy program for the scheme for the government, state government, that was on organic farming. Now the scheme is gone. Now they're implementing a central government program, which is called natural farming. So first thing I would suggest to anybody who's doing a farmversity in any locality is be wary of any government scheme and try to understand which scheme this is. Because you get to see a tentacle of a scheme, and often people get excited, people get uh, enthused by a possibility to engage. Most often than not, anyone with a ecoversity or a organic farming training program, etc., gets initially invited to engage as a trainer or as a provide some training for a group of farmers or a community or institution somewhere, etc. My experience has been work on the government official, because having seen many officials closely and policy making bodies, despite what Kavita mentioned about this democratic process that supposedly is in place, policies are made through opinions. I have seen people sit around tables and not the data, but the opinions people hold that rules how policies are framed. If at all, civil society manages to engage and bring out, maybe we make two words here, one sentence there, kind of a changes is all that you do after you put an enormous amount of effort, and it is a thankless job at the end of it. So at the policy level, that is what takes place. But what you can change is, if possible, and I don't know how much bandwidth the Farmversity people will have to engage consistently at the district or block or Zilla or state level. But if they have a capacity to engage at the local level, engage and try to educate the local official is one area where I would start. Because I have seen officials who promote chemical agriculture uh, take me to their backyard and show me how they are having a small patch of organic farm, how they are buying traditional rice from some farm, organic farmer somewhere. While there is a huge amount of this policy state system that is there for us to somehow try to engage with, try to change, etc. If you do not have that capacity, I would say try to engage with few officials at a time, because somehow there is a tipping point, hopefully, where you have enough people with opinions who take what is written in some of these policies a bit more seriously. We keep mentioning that, often we start by pointing out that there is a constitution that actually uses the word compassion. We actually mention it in our constitution, compassion towards all other beings. And how could you think about a weedicide? How could you think about a drone that today uh, tribal areas are reporting drones are killing uh, bees now? So we are talking about uh, we don't even measure it. We don't even know how many places drones are destroying. I have personally, in the last 1 month, heard it in three different pockets where drones usage for spraying weedicide has resulted in something. So there is a huge amount of, for me, challenge that is very complex out there, that comes from state policy, that comes from schemes, etc. But if a farmversity person, somebody who's actually working in the field, trying to promote natural farming in whatever name you call it, uh, just be wary of what are the schemes with which government comes to you, and how what are the scope of engagement that you have with them. Be clear to pick up your fights, and be clear to pick up your constructive engagement as well, because often constructive engagement could also be misleading. You may not be able to achieve much doing it. So that is where I would like to stop. I'm just adding it as a word of caution. If people are creating, because often I know that seed savers in Tamil Nadu, for instance, our young seed savers get very excited when they get invited to be trainers for a government program, or when they get invited to collectorate. Please go, please engage, but keep your expectations low, and educate yourself on what is the latest happening. I mean, I think Kavita ji mentioned earlier, Coalition for GM3 India, ASHA, and all these are names here in the list that she has listed out, but each of it is for me an education space. Much of all that we keep getting updated is from the mailing list of many of these groups that keep bouncing a lot of information. And it is these groups that actually educate us on what are actually happening in the field. So I would like to stop there in case Manas you want to add something further or more to this.
What's coming to me is also, let me just, but I'll ask the next question. But I see Padma also here, and Narsana and Karan, who are actually on ground running. These are at least two people I know here running a farmversity. They have the Aranya Permaculture Academy in Zahirabad, and Karan's farmversity in Chadol. Uh, Padma, are you there? Can I ask you a question about how are you navigating the policy space in context of running the Aranya Permaculture Academy? Was there any support you got, or any resistance, difficulty? Anything briefly you want to share?
Um, I can share the example of living soil concept in one of the projects, like where when we are implementing Andhra Pradesh drought mitigation project, so there is a lot of like there is a component was proposed by the Vasan of the living soil concept. The concept was everybody is like they're not willing to take up or implement as a project activity. But I could see like maybe we invited all of them, like bureaucrats, like all the state level agriculture officers, district level officers, and the implementing agencies and big NGOs. So everyone was stayed for 3 days at Aranya and going through the process and saw the real things, what is happening, what is the changes which they could observe and see whatever the things that are is happening and with the communities. And later on, they accepted that living soil concept because they have seen, because earlier they don't have that confidence whether we can able to do it or not. So this one, so after 3 days, everyone has agreed and the same concept was taken up in the project activities of Andhra Pradesh drought mitigation project. So, like in all the districts of drought districts of the Andhra Pradesh, 5 districts, each district around 500 hectares, 500 acres in each district was proposed to implement living soil concept. For that, there is an exclusive budget was allotted, implementation was done. I feel like really they are like what they have seen, they try to implement in the project area, they could able to speak about it, and bureaucrats and the agencies and the NGOs also agreed to do that, and then farmers are influenced about it. So this one, like this is my experience in living soil concept was introduced in the process.
That sounds very interesting and promising. Can you briefly describe the process, or what was done specifically so that this change could happen? Because we have, for this one positive story, we may have a 99 negative or unsuccessful stories. So what do you recommend to be done?
In these projects, because it's in the drought-prone area, all the works has been taken up. So there is a water governance, because when you are talking about the drought resilient production systems in agriculture and livestock, one of the things we need to talk about like water holding capacity, and then holding capacity, how it will come. So like biomass, how it can be generated, because the present scenario where they have seen like the present conventional practice is burning of all the cotton, the red pigeon pea, and then chickpea, and whatever it may be. Even castor also they started selling off it, and even banana is also they are putting on the burns and they are burning it off. This is the scenario in all the drought-prone districts. But when it is like when you're talking about the resilience of drought, and then these things, the contextually, like these things need to be implemented. How this can be carried out in implementation. So who is the implementation authority? So they should convince first before they go to the farmer. So for that, so the convince, like to giving awareness about what is happening about the soil, what is happening and how they are like need to be done, what kind of activities need to be done to build the soil health and to hold the moisture. So these things actually the awareness, and then it's also, is it practically possible or not? So this is what they have they're not convinced about it because it's more laborious and other things. But when it is coming to the practicality, it's like a simple thing which they could observe. So the simple things, instead of burning up biomass, how they can keep a 1 feet next to the farm. So in all the living soil concepts, based on what they have seen in Aranya, the same activities was proposed in the 100 hectares of action plan.
So I understand that Aranya being a farmversity, they could hold a good demonstration, and that's a learning that it can any farmversity which comes up actually can hold real practical examples for the government officials to come and see. What Ram was also saying, to engage locally, to build sufficient traction between a conversation, So our Farmversity can actually play that role at the grassroots, which especially in the natural non-industrial farming space, because that space is taken by the larger universities anyway. So that is a learning which I can take from this. I believe. What do you say, Kavita, in terms of what were your examples with Makam or with DDS at the grassroots? How specific policies or schemes were you able to harness some of them or to kind of affect their implementation?
Yeah, so some of the better schemes out there did get initiated by CSO experiences on the ground. If we have anything positive to say about some of the schemes or some of the statutes also, you can be sure that most of them emerge from civil society, proving a point on the ground, if you want to call it successful demonstration or whatever. And then some bureaucrat or political leader getting convinced about it. And, the kind of example that Padma has just described involved the CSOs actually shaping the project. They are the ones who created the project proposal on behalf of a particular agency or department in the government, and then World Bank steps in to fund it. Most of the things that one can cite as good examples are exactly this. In the agroecology space, uh, I mean, what happens later on is the real story, which is that in implementation, it gets distorted so much, even after the best of guidelines are created. And importantly, CSOs, which also come forward to implement a particular good scheme, uh, become actually bankrupted. All kinds of slave work is extracted out of them, but they don't get funds. But just to give you some examples, I think broadly scanning what we have out there, I think those projects and schemes that have emerged from the rural development department are always better than what have emerged from the agriculture ministries and department, because rural development takes a livelihoods approach, and agriculture department and ministry to this day is extractive. It's only looking at yield to the exclusion of everything else. Whatever happens to resources, farm economics, people's health, they don't care much. So broadly, approaching the rural livelihoods mission and so on for looking at what they have as schemes is not a bad idea.
That's a good
Similarly,
hack. That's a good
yeah,
hack.
yeah, if you want to call it
Yeah.
a good hack, yes. Uh, then the other thing is, in the agroecology space, within the rural development ministry, there used to be something called the Mahila Kisan Sashактikaran Pariyojana. The guidelines got created by various agroecology organizations and practitioners sitting round the table with bureaucrats. And one of the best schemes out there in terms of front-ending, women farmers as the extension agents who will create learning spaces where extension is not seen as a top-down thing. Various things that were different, including that scheme being a demand-driven scheme, like NREGS is, where people evolve project proposals, submit, and then the government screens them and gives approvals. But that's shut now. For implementation related issues, most NGOs walked out, though the guidelines look excellent on the ground. There was something that was started called the Pandit Deen Dayal Upadhyaya
Yeah.
Krishi,
Krishi
which was
Yojana, yeah.
about, I just shared a link of that, which is about uh, practicing pioneering organic and ecological farmers farms and their household, their homestead, and so on, being the training ground for other farmers. And it evolved in a very good manner. And it is something that our own friends influenced the government on. And the scheme in the initial stages looked very, very exciting. We all gave lists of who are the farmers for whom this support has to be given for a little infrastructure, a training facility, basic things that they can do of capturing what is happening in their farm so that other farmers can learn. About 1 lakh rupees for 5-day training modules after infrastructure, building, residential facilities, and so on are provided to people like Subhash Sharma in Yavatmal. Some of the best heard names in India of individual farmers, not organizations, were all there in the initial list. But before we realized it, ICAR and others stepped in saying that, oh, what do these farmers know about how to impart trainings? We will create the syllabus. And for across India, they standardized the syllabus and curriculum on Gau Adharit Kheti. And they decided which parts will be handled by the local KVK, whatever. And we had these pioneering farmers step out of it saying, "Humko isse kuch lena dena nahi hai." I heard someone write in the chat message, sorry, I saw someone say कि बीच बीच में हिंदी की भी जरूरत है. Manas, you'll have to please take care of
I will do. हाँ मैं
if
करता
there's
हूँ
any.
उसमें.
हाँ. So
Yes.
we did have a scheme like that, for instance. Both MKSP and this no longer exist. But recently, we've had the government of India once again say कि एग्रीकल्चर बजट जो भी अनाउंस किया गया था केंद्र सरकार की तरफ से, हम इंग्लिश में केंद्र सरकार को सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट नहीं कहते हैं, बाय द वे, साउथ इंडिया के लोग, हम उसको
हाँ.
यूनियन सरकार बोलते हैं. केंद्र सरकार नहीं बोलना चाहिए. हिंदी में भी आप लोग शब्द क्या होगा आप देख लीजिए. They've already centralized too much. We shouldn't legitimize them by calling them as central government. तो यूनियन गवर्नमेंट के जो बजटरी एलोकेशंस है, सबसे ज्यादा तो पीएम किसान में जाता है, मगर बाकी जो है आफ्टर मेनी इयर्स दे सेड कि हम इसको राष्ट्रीय कृषि विकास योजना RKVY के ढांचे में वापस ला रहे हैं. RKVY में ये होता है कि राज्य सरकार के पास एक स्क्रीनिंग कमिटी होता है, एंड फ्रॉम द डिस्ट्रिक्ट अपवर्ड project proposals are sent to the state screening committee. यूनियन गवर्नमेंट से एक रिप्रेजेंटेटिव होता है, मगर डिसीजन मेकिंग हैपेंस एट द स्टेट लेवल ऑफ व्हाट विल दे गिव दैट प्रोजेक्ट फॉर. बहुत ज्यादा पैसा यूनिवर्सिटीज ने ले लिया अपने आप के लिए, बड़े बड़े बिल्डिंग्स बना लिया, ये कर दिया वो कर दिया. बट दैट इज समथिंग that you can possibly use as you go forward by getting your district collector or whoever to float proposals that go all the way up to the state screening committee where you get approvals. तो मेरे लिए तो फार्मवर्सिटीज के लिए फिर से वो RKVY का स्कोप थोड़ा खुलते हुए दिख रहा है. For the individual farmers, I think NREGS still offers a great opportunity, especially if you are from particular communities, which is broadly classified as SC, ST, and so on. Horticulture crops अगर आप उगा रहे हैं, आपके diversity based permaculture farm में भी अगर आप उसको उस डिपार्टमेंट के थ्रू आप दिखा सकते हैं, पैसा भी है और उसमें कुछ गुंजाइश है, कुछ सहायता वहां से लेके. देखिए, सरकार से कभी कभी सपोर्ट लेने की इसलिए भी हम स्कोप देखते हैं, बिकॉज it is something on which some government official may start having ownership on. And if they do, the whole hope is maybe they'll promote it with other farmers. Maybe they will scale it up. You know, you have these ambassadors who, if they have approved it and actually find it working on the ground, maybe they will take it to more farmers. That's the reason also for which we engage with these people. तो ऐसे NREGS का है. मैं तो एग्रो इकोलॉजी के लिए जो स्पेसिफिक स्कीम्स एंड प्रोग्राम्स है, आज के दिन तो मैं कहूंगी उनकी तरफ मत जाइए. द सेम एडवाइस एज राम. जो परंपरागत कृषि विकास योजना है, PKVY, या NMNF, नेशनल मिशन ऑन नेचुरल फार्मिंग, जो बिल्कुल टेक ऑफ ही नहीं किया है.
नहीं हुआ.
और जो नॉर्थ ईस्ट के लिए वैल्यू चेन डेवलपमेंट के लिए, वैल्यू चेन नाम से जहाँ पे डाइवर्सिटी बेस्ड क्रॉपिंग हुआ करता था, उसमें हाई वैल्यू मोनोकल्चर्स को जो लाया जा रहा है, these are schemes that are no, even though they are meant for agroecology. Unfortunately, the scheme designs are so bad that I will not talk about them. मगर आप में से अगर कोई एग्रो इकोलॉजिकल प्रोड्यूस का मार्केटिंग के लिए भी कुछ करना चाहते हैं, नॉट जस्ट एट द प्रोडक्शन एंड, मैं तो कहूंगी engage with various rural livelihood missions, as well as anything that FPOs are able to access, to see कि local markets जहाँ पे सरकार ही उसको खरीद के सबसे गरीब बच्चों के लिए, गरीब लोगों के लिए, या SHGs में भी जो सबसे डिसएडवांटेज महिलाएं हैं और उनके परिवार हैं, उनको सेफ खाना कैसे खिलाया जा सकता है, उसके लिए इन्फ्लुएंस करना. आई थिंक दैट्स समथिंग दैट वन कैन डिस्कस, बिकॉज पद्मा विल नो दिस. आंध्रा और तेलंगाना में ही रूरल लाइवलीहुड्स मिशन के जो प्रोग्राम्स हुआ करते थे, उसमें एक फूड सिक्योरिटी क्रेडिट लाइन नाम का एक लिटिल इंटरवेंशन हुआ करता था, जिसमें टू मेक श्योर दैट नो वन गोज हंग्री for the hunger months. The village organizations actually procure from their own members at MSP and supply it in kind to members, और वो इंटरेस्ट फ्री कैश रीपेमेंट थ्रू आउट द ईयर. उस फूड सिक्योरिटी क्रेडिट लाइन में 6-7 अलग अलग चीजें जो हर आंध्रा एंड तेलंगाना किचन के लिए एसेंशियल माना जाता था, वो सप्लाई हुआ करता था. बाद में उसको जाके NPM प्रोड्यूस, नॉन पेस्टिसाइडल प्रोड्यूस में महिला गुटों ने उसको प्रोक्योर किया और अपने ही मेंबर्स को दिया. तो we have to look at those interventions that can possibly improve production systems for more number of people. After all, why should we not? When I would say, don't look for your multiversity having to run with government schemes and programs. बिल्कुल फंस जाओगे. आप उसको तो इंडिपेंडेंट रखो और कहीं और से रिसोर्स मोबिलाइज, एंड देयर आर ऑलवेज रिसोर्सेस अवेलेबल व्हेन समबडी डज गुड कमिटेड वर्क इन ऑल आवर इयर्स ऑफ वर्क. हाँ, मगर इंडिविजुअल किसानों के लिए, व्हाइल यू आर डूइंग योर गुड वर्क, साथ ही साथ दूसरों के लिए you can always put in efforts to shape local interventions, and don't go in for one size fits all large schemes and programs out there. You create your interventions through good bureaucrats, through good political leadership, including MLA lads and so on. Recently, एक राज्यसभा का MP lads, last bit Manas, सीड वेराइटीज कंजर्वेशन के लिए इस्तेमाल किया गया था. That's the first time in India that MP lads were tweaked to do good work. Or, Indian cotton species ka seed conservation, paddy varieties ka seed conservation is happening thanks to this MP called Anil Hegde, for instance. So there are possibilities. I'll stop there.
Thanks, Kavita. Not for stopping, but for all the information which you shared. And let me take it to Ram on this. Some thoughts which are coming to me while listening to this conversation, like looking outside the agriculture ministry's domain. So I have seen a tribal welfare ministry doing work in the tribal space. Then we have rural development we talked of. Then food processing uh, industry. Then FPO making. How are these midday meal schemes, local procurement of food and all? What do you say to these? Like any positive stories coming out, or how to navigate this space for our work?
Anyone who's got a target, any department that has got a target to, uh, because every department runs on targets. Pick up where agriculture is a peripheral target and not a main target for the department.
Mm-hmm.
That's why rural development department has been far more successful, because they really don't care one way or other about sustainable farming or natural farming. Farming, many of the rural development authorities feel farming is not their business. That is supposed to be done by agri department. Why are we even doing it? Right? So, and secondly, many of them have actually been exposed to deeper questions by being in rural development long enough. At least most people who have spent 20, 30 years. And I have done training for rural development officials for people who have spent all their time in rural development and people who are newcomers. There is still some amount of idealism with which people enter the department. That's what I have found. And that is why, whether it is Andhra or even in Tamil Nadu, I mean, let me give an example of something that has worked in Tamil Nadu where civil society very recently has played a significant role. We changed something on community farm school rather than farmer field school, which is what agricultural department does, where people get to work on a particular farm with a particular crop over a season. We've done it as a community farm school where the community drives the school at every village level. And over the last 3 years, this is part of a project that is implemented by the Rural Development Department in Tamil Nadu. Nearly uh, about 1.5 lakh people, farmers, have been impacted through this, where it is a community driven scheme. And one of the areas in which Farmversities could really spend time on is strengthening the local community institutions. Whether it is the panchayat or a community based institution, I wouldn't say farmer producer company, because farmer producer company has become a bit of a fashionable thing. A lot of people wear. The scale is something that really, unless you have the manpower to handle that kind of a scale, don't engage. Look at the farmer producer groups or the JLGs or the SHGs or the CLG or whatever, by several names in which they are created in different departments. NABARD calls it by one name, rural development calls it by another name, agriculture department will call it by a third name. Regardless of what name it is, uh, see if you can strengthen the community institution at the village level, which is definitely worth strengthening, because this entire effort of community farm school using locally available community member who will become a teacher, and it's no easy joke to call a community member or a practitioner as a teacher in a state where all agricultural knowledge is seen as vested only with the university. Uh, so somehow this was managed, and to some extent that there is a this community institution, a trainer or a practitioner comes to, like what Kavitaji just now was talking about, practitioners being recognized as trainers, is there is a scope for it today. In fact, what we are trying to do in Tamil Nadu is there is a scope under the skill development mission called recognizing prior learning, or RPL we call it. We're trying to see, can we create even farmers into RPL? Is there a scope for us to think about practicing farmers to be brought under RPL, which means they become recognized? Because one of the challenges that has been happening in recent times is the slow, I mean, you know that at a larger systemic level, there is no recognition of the farmer's knowledge. But even at the, there are rules being created whereby a farmer cannot uh, teach another farmer. A farmer cannot become a trainer for another farmer. So there are these kind of rules and policies that are being influenced and created even as we speak. This is has been a battle that people activists are fighting out at another level. But what I would like to emphasize is, if there are community institutions, whether it's a seed bank or anything, how do we strengthen them is an area that farmversities can definitely spend their time on, and it's worth. And second thing that Kavita ji said, I think she mentioned it in the passing, but I would like to emphasize is, between a bureaucrat and a politician, choose a politician to influence if possible. Politician has to face public every 5 years. Bureaucrat doesn't face public at all. That's the reality to it. Accountability is far more for a politician. If the public sentiment is, and believe me, public sentiment has never ever been towards ecological or natural farming in India than now. We are sitting at one of the most amazing periods, because the pressure of, uh, I mean, despite all the challenges brought in by the state and the corporate entities all around, if organic farming is grown to what it is today in the last 25 years of significant manner, where we today call that the largest number of organic farmers are in India, I think it's primarily because uh, there is a definite recognition among people. I have trained officials and I have trained farmers. I always look at farmers going back and implementing a natural practice or a farming in their field much faster than officials being able to make any changes in the way they do things. At the most, some of them have quit and gone back and done farming themselves. That has also happened. I mean, it happens in exceptional cases, but there are officials who have given up and said, I'll go do natural farming. I don't want to be in the system, which practices a very destructive kind of a farm system. So we need to look at engaging and definitely looking at political entities, like she said about MPs. A good politician who understands natural farming, and majority of the politicians in India, somewhere hidden in their background, they all are sourcing their food from an organic farmer. This is what we have found.
Yeah.
Many of our chief ministers and ministers source their food from personal kitchens are linked to some farmer somewhere. So that's a weak point. I mean, you can always get people by their tummies. You know, you cannot get them from the policy level or state level. If you want to engage with, please start from there. And I remember one of the things that we early on millets mission started in Tamil Nadu. The first thing that was done was the then additional chief secretary, invited many IAS officers, and she fed them millets meal. She made them a full multi-course millets meal.
We fed them, Ram.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean,
So it's
so
not yeah, this
it's
is
not
the
cheap.
technique. This is what we all need to do.
Yeah, it's the civil society actually created and fed. I mean, Kavita Vijay was there that day, and she remembers it. And believe me, the first thing that all officers did, the only thing this official told all the officers is, even if you don't come for listening to us, come for the lunch. They all ate, and whether they listened to millets became popular or not, the caterer who was new and who was promoted by civil society at that time to put a millet spread, he became very popular with all the departments. He got invited to cater to each one of the departments, and that is how the millets idea started spreading all around. Sometimes it takes one official at the right place to make a big shift, but again, I would say, don't expect superheroes or magic bullets. Systems need to change, means you need to change that last skeptical person who sits and probably goes through all the papers in the department. Identify who is the person who actually reads anything in the department. If you want to engage, engage with that guy, because that is the one who scribbles in the corners and says, this is not work, this will not work, etc. So keep busting myths with them and keep creating, I would say, strengthening local institutions, engage with them, address governments more as individuals. As systems, it could be overwhelming. Not everybody can handle. I mean, the example that you mentioned from Andhra, it takes an institution that has spent long years to be able to shape a policy. And even then, implementation will always be a challenge. However, individuals you can address, you can convert. See if you can tackle them at the Farmversity level if you're starting small. But if you're grown and if you're big and you can do it, I would say concentrate on a region. Take a district, take a block, mandal, whatever. Work on the food systems end to end during in this space. Kalasapakam in Tiruvannamalai district is a very good example of a Farmversity for us in Tamil Nadu. They have moved, they started by saying no branding about a year ago. I said, we will not brand our food. So we started a movement called no branding. And then they said no labeling. And today, farmers in this village are saying de-expertising. You know, from no branding, no labeling, zero packing to de-expertising. This is working on local economy for you. When you are working on local economy and you have direct link from farmers to consumers, you can make significant changes. And now Kalasapakam is inspire other farmers, other groups in other places. Farmers come to the Kalasapakam meeting, they learn from them, they try to go back and implement a few things there, which is how organically these things will actually change and work. So link up with people who are working on solutions in other parts, which you can learn from and you can work with. That creates a significant difference also. So this is where I would stop because I think Manas will,
Yes.
before Manas rings the bell, I'm stopping.
No, you paused me with a second before that. We're well in time. I I think the idea of this localization is very powerful. And Atul, I want to put this up that we need to do a hackathon for the Farmversities now. We have done sufficient hackathons for the unlearning societies. Now we need to collect all the Farmversity founders and promoters and people into one workshop for few days and take one mandal, one panchayat, one district at a time. Let's kind of plan something on those lines. Thanks, Ram, for bringing those insights. Now, let me open the. We have actually answered much more than what we had planned for. I have a question coming from Mukesh, which is I was seeing the questions. Now, let's go to that. Mukesh asked, how do you both see the strong push on digitization, things like AgriStack? The government is currently offering these at the name of digital services and government schemes, etc. Uh, uh, Quickly, uh, uh, and who wants to take this? AgriStack, digitization. Uh,
I think Ram has begun talking. He's on mute.
That's another 2 hours
okay.
if you get started on that. Uh, no,
But
I don't know. I don't.
you
I
did talk
don't
of the digitization and
see.
the Sultan
There is an intent and there is an intent. There is a policy, and the policy arrives at. Uh, I mean, this. I keep when people talk about AgriStack is a a messy way of arriving at an intent of centralizing. And I go back to that question that a farmer, I think in the Calcutta consultation asked, "ऐसी क्या मजबूरी है, GM लाना जरूरी है." This was during the consultation meetings that was asked. This became a slogan everywhere. And ऐसी क्या मजबूरी है अब, why do we have to prioritize this agri stack at this point in time? This entire thing of uh, doubling farmers income through every new technology, we will change the technology, we will change the service provider, we will call it by a new name, but the mirage of doubling farmers' income has continued for the last 10 years. This is like every 6 months a new term. 10 years ago, we did not talk about agri-stack probably. Now we call it by a new name. We will call it by another name tomorrow. There are so many aspects to it that I keep wondering. I mean, I have been able to access sometimes private data of farmers from openly available government scheme in web portals, including phone numbers. In the name of traceability, in the name of beneficiary identification and transparency, you are compromising private information. That's the first level. I mean, that's the most. I mean, that is happening through. I mean, most of our data that is being collected is so terrible that it is happening in so many levels. Then this entire thing of who exactly does this for you? What is the medium that is being done and who's doing it for you? What are the service providers? What are the intentions? And what is it that they will do with this data? And then how is it that this data will actually serve the farmer better than what has been done so far? I mean, how will it be available? If you notice something that has happened in the last 10, 20 years now is that data entry happens at the village level, data entry happens at the block level, at the district level, at the state level. Data access does not has the lowest amount of access at the district level or at the village level. We have aggregation of data, and the aggregation at different levels is centrally available for a few people, but is not available if, let us say, a panchayat leader wants to use satellite data and all kinds of data for creating a plan at the village level. Does she or he have access to all the data from the village? That has been that is for me another question. This entire thing of federalism. Where do we stop? I mean, who has more access to all this information? Um, there is a lot more here in terms of not just compromising private data, ownership of data, intent with which the data is uh, utilized or aggregated, at what levels and who aggregates them, where is it stored, etc., to the level of how it will exactly impact the farmers' lives. How will it actually make any difference to what has already happened? Are we tracking the instances of extreme weather that is becoming more frequent to be able to arrive at some patterns? Are we doing a hyper local level simulation based upon the changing groundwater scenario and the rainfall pattern, which we have data for at least 100 years in some parts? Are we creating that to arrive at something that will be useful and proactively provide the data to the farmers at a cost they can afford? Or are we making it available to technology companies? Because every second company that comes up today in the agri tech space or agri fintech space, or God knows what else they call it now, is offering an app. There are like millions of agricultural apps. I mean, India must be the biggest dustbin of agricultural apps being created in the world.
That's
there
true.
are
Yeah.
there are so many apps that are there for everything, and ultimately many of these apps actually will fizzle out, or they will go through what happened in the early days of internet. Big companies will acquire many of them and make it into one massive service base, and that is where we are heading. That is my biggest concern and worry about it. And um, I I tend to look at it with excessive suspicion and skepticism right now, fundamentally because I come from a technology space and I know what this technology can do. The surveillance capitalism that we talk about these days uh, is it is another way in which, to me, a lot of the initiatives that are there. I mean, there are several good intentions that are spoken of, definitely. But I will see the good intentions if I see a system design that talks about strengthening a community institution at the village level or at a mandal level, not something that can be aggregated at a national level and come up with uh, food security 2070 or some vague terms that we come up with. So that is where my very short. I can talk a bit more,
Yeah.
but I would stop.
So
So, Manas,
yeah,
other than the privacy, ownership, surveillance, centralization, who's going to benefit from all of these questions that Ram has raised? For us in Asha, digitalization is going to become one more tool of invisibilizing the real farmers of this country.
yeah,
And
agreed.
what's happening is that, farmers are considered to be those on whose name land pattas exist, whereas they are not farmers in reality. Let's say women farmers, Adivasi farmers, tenant farmers. And digitalization is actually contributing to, entrenched uh, self-interest of absentee landowners in invisibilizing other farmers, the real cultivators, a lot more, because that's the combination which is allowing several DBT and DIT schemes to reach these farmers. So there used to be a zamana when you had to fight absentee landowners on the ground for taking benefits that are meant for cultivators, whereas they are not cultivators, and to fight for basic resource rights, land rights, and so on for the real cultivators. Today, it's impossible to fight them because it is digitalization which is allowing them to keep their land, to be absent from agriculture, and also get your 6,000 PM Kisan or your compensation or your any other DBT in states like Telangana, Raitu Bandhu, this, that, and the other. You can sit in the US and get a little Indian rupees on top of what you're earning. So,
So the real
it,
cultivator, largely a lot of women, uh,
and
tenant
women,
farmers.
they're all out. And from Asha, our position paper, or on many issues that are emerging out there, Asha keeps putting out position papers and discussion notes, and we respond a lot to governments whenever they put out, whenever a new development happens. We read it in the papers, we look at a draft, and so on. So kisanswaraj.in is our website, and you would find what we had to say about AgriStack in there. Our view is that digitization cannot be negated. I mean, you can't resist it. Digitization is an inevitability. But how do you engage with it in a manner that it has beneficial use cases, if you like, for farmers, real farmers?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, any other resources you want to share, please, Ram, Kavita, and other people who are here, where we can read about the stories, case studies, how to put up a resistance, how to participate in a system, or help create a system. Any those websites, white papers, where all we can look. So there are some. And yeah, my request to everybody is that Kala, if you can share the form link here, so that we can create our own registry of interested people, and we can share these resources actually through emails as a digest after every. Atul, can you do that? So we have a form, a
Yes,
simple
yes,
form.
that can be shared. Yeah.
Yeah,
Let, let
please
me
share
let me
that.
see if hmm.
So any other question if we can take quickly, because actually we are just 8:30 is the time. So officially we are kind of closing this chat.
I'm
But
just sharing the form. 1 second.
okay. Let me request an extension of few minutes. In the meantime, I've got a message from Madhu, which says, was the ecosystem that you mentioned somebody called Karan Singh work on? Madhu, Karan is here and he works with the Farmversity in Jadol near Udaipur, and they have 15 fellows inducted every 3 months. And I think, Karan, would you want to say more about it? आप कुछ बताना चाहेंगे?
हाँ, मैं यहाँ पर भी क्विकली शेयर कर देता हूँ, बाकी अपना कांटेक्ट डिटेल्स भी चैट बॉक्स में डाल दूंगा ताकि और भी डिटेल में बात हो जाए। तो हमारा यहाँ पे सेंटर है झाडोल में, और यहाँ पे हम लोग फार्मिंग से रिलेटेड ट्रेनिंग्स प्रोवाइड करते हैं। और ये जो है बेसिकली अभी ट्राइबल फेलोज है हमारे
Can you
पास सारे,
pack this
आसपास के जो यहाँ ट्राइबल
Kavita?
यूथ है। तो वो लोग यहाँ आते हैं और बहुत सारी चीजें हम लोग यहाँ पे करते हैं। एनिमल हस्बेंड्री है, हमारे पास एक प्रोसेसिंग यूनिट है, फिर हम कुछ स्कूलों के साथ काम करते हैं, लोकल अदर जो एनजीओज यहाँ पर एग्रीकल्चर से रिलेटेड हैं उनके साथ हम लोग जुड़ करके कुछ काम करते हैं। तो इस तरह का है। मैं बाकी अपना नंबर यहाँ शेयर कर देता हूँ जिसमें डिटेल में और डिस्कस कर सकते हैं।
थैंक्स करण। फार्मवर्सिटीज का फॉर्म यहाँ पे आ गया है। Please fill that form, and definitely we are not the ones to spam. We don't have enough bandwidth to send excess emails and WhatsApp messages. So please feel safe in sharing your information here, so that we can keep you connected. And thanks, Kavita, thanks, Ram, for joining in. It was I think, just a tip of an iceberg जिसके बारे में हम आज टच कर पाए, but I hope we can engage. I will have more opportunities to engage on specifics in the future in this space. And thanks a lot, everybody, for joining in.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you. Khuda Hafiz. Good night.
Thank
Khuda
you,
Hafiz.
Manas
Thank you.
Bhai.
Thank you.
Happy
Thank
day.
you. Thank you. Nice to
Thank
see you,
you,
Kavita
Padma.
and Ram sir.